Hello, my name is Danny Nowlan and I'm the Director of ChassisSim Technologies. Welcome to this latest ChassisSim video tutorial, and today we're going to be talking about the ChassisSim version 3.27 release. ChassisSim version 3.27 has just been released. If you're in the ChassisSim community, you should have received the emails last week. For those of you who are online users, you can go to the ChassisSim website, log into your online account, and it should be there. Okay. Let's talk about what's new in ChassisSim version 3.27. There are a couple of changes to be aware of with ChassisSim version 3.27. The first change is that we now have a brake ramping function. Now what that does is that for those of you who are using 2D tire models, what this does is it just applies a little bit of a ramp to the brake. Where before, when ChassisSim brakes, it just brakes without due regard for man, woman, child, or beast. This now introduces a bit of a ramp into it. So for those of you on 2D tire models, it should help out in terms of your initial correlation. It'll particularly help for those of you who are using 2D tire models and smooth track approximation. So that's a really good thing to take into account. So to enable it, you simply click on Enable Brake Ramping and choose your ramp time. I've got that set to about 0.1 of a second, but that's a pretty good rough rule of thumb. Now, for those of you who are using 3D tire models and are using bumps, you're probably not going to need to worry about this. That being said, it's a good little thing to have in the back of your pocket, so that's something I would recommend to you. Now, the other thing that ChassisSim version 3.27 comes with is we've just spruced up the electric engine properties. We've been adding more features to it, like regen maps, and the other thing that we've added to it now is paddle regen maps. So the way that works is, like with the brake regen maps, is what you will do is that you specify the number of maps you want. You select your currently selected map, and your paddle map is a function of RPM and paddle actuation percentage. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind with the paddle maps. First things first. When they are activated, the throttle gets cut. It just seems a little bit silly if you're trying to activate paddle regen and your foot is flat to the floor. So bear that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, because of the nature of paddle maps and because we're using this in a lap time simulation environment, is make sure that when you're specifying this, to really make this work, click here to specify paddle percent regen via distance, and you simply have a simple ASCII text file that has distance in the first column in meters and percent actuation in the second column. If you go into the ChassisSim help under powertrain, you'll see that documented there for you. The other thing too that we've added for both the brake regen and for the paddle regen maps is that you'll see here you've now got a flag. Click here if these maps are specified at the engine. So what that allows you to do is that allows you to specify the maps either specified at the wheel, that torque regen at the wheel, or torque regen at the engine. So that is something that can be left to the user, and depends on how your brake regen and paddle regen maps have been specified. The other change that we've thrown into ChassisSim version 3.27 is, if you go into the track replay and you go into tire temps, you'll notice here there's a little flag that we've added here. Click here to remove model safeties. Now, what this does is that in an earlier tutorial, I discussed how you would use the ChassisSim track replay feature to do fixed vehicle inputs. So what the remove safety modes does is it basically allows you to really crank on the steering and to see what the effects are going to be. Obviously, to cater for ill-conditioned models with the track replay, there are a few safeties in there to make sure that the model doesn't explode if you've screwed up. Now what we do here is that we click here off the model safeties to make sure that when you start putting in these vehicle inputs, you'll get the full gambit of what it's going to do. However, one thing I would strongly advise you to do, make sure if you're just doing a bog standard track replay, keep this off. You only really activate it if you're using the track replay simulation to really explore if you're using it to explore the limits of what the vehicle can do in my last tutorial that I described. Now, the other thing that we've done in the ChassisSim version 3.27 release is there have been a few bug fixes. However, one thing that we've done in the ChassisSim version 3.27 release is that when you install ChassisSim, you'll see under the help directory, you're going to see a folder there called Excel Resources. So let me just open that up for you. In Excel Resources, you're now going to see an Excel document called CSIM Setup Service version 2. If you open that, click here to enable the macros. Don't worry, there's nothing terribly untoward here. What this does is this is a little Excel setup sheet that calls ChassisSim externally. So what this has been provided for you as in the version 3.27 release as sort of a manual on how to get going with getting ChassisSim talking to Excel. I presented the tutorial on this would have been, if my memory serves me correctly, a couple of months ago. And what this does is this encapsulates what I talked about in that tutorial. Now, given the significance of this, I'm actually going to be presenting this shortly in another tutorial, so I don't want to get bogged down with it. However, you'll find that in the help directory under Excel Resources, there's a zip file and there's a Microsoft Word document that'll tell you how to set this up, what the environment is, and a quick guide to setting this all up. So I really would commend that to you, but again, I'll be covering this in further detail next week. So, for those of you who are in the ChassisSim community, I look forward to you having a good I would look forward to you guys having a good play with that. If you're not in the ChassisSim community, sign up to our online simulation and test drive it yourself. And I look forward to catching you guys in the next ChassisSim tutorial or the next episode of Dan's Vehicle Dynamics Corner.